3,000 years ago, one king dared to build something the world had never seen and may never see again. On a mountain sacred to three faiths, the most ambitious construction project in human history was about to begin. King Solomon, son of David, ruler of Israel, received a divine command: build a house worthy of God himself. But this was no ordinary building. Its design came directly from divine instruction, passed from God to David, then to Solomon. Solomon's father David had dreamed of this temple, but God told him his son would be the one to build it. The project required materials so rare and expensive, Solomon had to look beyond his borders to find them. Solomon forged an alliance with Hiram, king of Tyre, the greatest maritime power of the ancient world. In exchange for cedar and cypress wood, Solomon offered Hiram 20,000 cores of wheat and 20,000 baths of olive oil every single year. 80,000 woodcutters were deployed into the mountains of Lebanon, the largest logging operation the ancient world had ever seen. Each log was dragged down treacherous mountain paths to the Mediterranean coast, a journey of weeks for a single tree. Thousands of logs were then floated in giant sea rafts from Tyre all the way to the port of Joppa, hundreds of miles away. From Joppa, the timber was hauled uphill to Jerusalem, 35 miles inland through rocky desert terrain. Meanwhile, beneath Jerusalem itself, something extraordinary was happening underground. 70,000 stone carriers and 80,000 stonecutters worked the quarries, carving blocks of limestone so precisely they needed no mortar. The Bible records something astonishing: no hammer, axe, or iron tool was heard at the temple construction site. Every stone was cut to exact measurements at the quarry, then transported silently to the site, a feat of engineering precision beyond modern imagination. The workforce was staggering: 153,600 workers total, organized into rotating shifts of 10,000 men every month. For every month of labor, workers received 1 month of rest. Solomon's workforce was organized like a modern corporation. Solomon summoned the most skilled craftsmen alive: Hiram Abiff, a master of bronze, gold, and architecture, whose reputation stretched across the known world. This master craftsman would design the temple's most iconic features, objects so spectacular they became legends for millennia. Hiram cast two colossal bronze pillars named Jachin and Boaz, each standing 27 feet tall, representing strength and establishment. These twin pillars flanked the temple entrance like guardians, visible for miles, gleaming in the Jerusalem sun. Hiram also cast the molten sea, a circular bronze basin 15 feet across, holding 12,000 gallons of water, resting on 12 bronze oxen. Inside, every surface was covered in pure gold. The walls, the floors, even the ceiling beams were overlaid with gold leaf. The Bible records Solomon used 3,000 talents of gold for the temple alone, equivalent to over $3 billion in today's money. But that was just the gold. Silver, bronze, cedar, and precious stones added tens of billions more to the final cost. Modern economists estimate the total cost of Solomon's temple at over $216 billion, making it the most expensive building ever constructed. The temple complex was not just one building, it was an entire sacred city within a city, rising on an artificial platform. To create a flat platform on the uneven hillside, engineers constructed retaining walls and filled the gaps with earth and stone, ancient terraforming. The outer court, the court of the Gentiles, was large enough to hold tens of thousands of people during festivals. Beyond it lay the inner court, restricted to priests alone, where the great bronze altar stood, consuming sacrifices day and night. The bronze altar was 30 feet wide and 15 feet tall. Fire burned on it continuously, never allowed to go out. Inside the holy place stood the golden table of showbread, always holding 12 fresh loaves representing the 12 tribes of Israel. 10 golden menorahs lined the holy place, each one cast from pure gold, casting eternal light across walls carved with palms and cherubim. Every inch of cedar wall was hand-carved with cherubim, palm trees, and flowers, then covered entirely in gold. The golden altar of incense burned twice daily, morning and evening, filling the entire temple with sacred fragrance. And then behind a massive veil of blue, purple, and crimson lay the most sacred room ever constructed. The Holy of Holies, a perfect cube of 30 feet, so sacred that only the high priest could enter once a year, on Yom Kippur. 2 golden cherubim stood inside, each with a 15-foot wingspan, their outstretched wings touching in the center, spanning the entire width of the room. This room had one purpose: to house the Ark of the Covenant, the most sacred object in the world. On the day the Ark was brought into the temple, the Bible says a divine cloud filled the entire building, so thick the priests couldn't stand to minister. The cloud of God's glory descended, and for a moment, heaven touched earth inside Solomon's temple. Solomon knelt before his people and prayed the most famous dedication prayer in history: spanning 7 days of celebration. The dedication ceremony lasted 14 days, with 22,000 cattle and 120,000 sheep sacrificed in the greatest religious festival the ancient world had ever witnessed. For 14 nights, Jerusalem was transformed into a sea of fire and celebration, visible for 50 miles in every direction. 7 years after construction began, Solomon's temple stood complete, the most magnificent structure the ancient world had ever produced. The temple complex covered the entire top of Mount Moriah, a raised platform that dominated Jerusalem's skyline like nothing else. No other building in the ancient world matched the temple's combination of scale, material wealth, and engineering precision. Merchants, diplomats, and pilgrims traveled from Egypt, Arabia, and Persia just to witness it. The temple became the ancient world's greatest wonder. Even the Queen of Sheba, ruler of the wealthiest kingdom in Africa, was left breathless. The Bible says there was no more spirit in her when she saw Solomon's glory. The temple operated like a magnificent machine, hundreds of priests, Levites, and musicians maintaining perpetual worship around the clock. Solomon appointed 4,000 musicians to play in the temple, making it the world's first dedicated house of sacred music. The high priest's garments alone were worth a king's ransom, adorned with 12 precious stones representing each tribe of Israel. The temple's architecture encoded sacred mathematics. Every measurement was symbolic, every proportion was intentional. The temple was aligned precisely with the rising sun at the spring equinox. Light would flood through the eastern gate directly into the Holy of Holies. Once a year, at the precise moment of spring sunrise, a golden beam of light would travel the entire length of the temple, from gate to Holy of Holies. For 400 years, the temple stood as the spiritual heart of Israel, surviving wars, famines, and political upheaval. But in 586 BC, the unthinkable happened. Nebuchadnezzar's Babylonian army surrounded Jerusalem. After an 18-month siege, Jerusalem fell, and Babylonian soldiers began their march up toward the Temple Mount. Nebuchadnezzar's general ordered the temple looted. Every golden vessel, every bronze fixture was stripped and carried to Babylon. Then the soldiers set fire to the temple, 400 years of history burning in a single catastrophic night. The Jewish people were marched into Babylonian exile, weeping by the rivers of Babylon, remembering the glory of what they had lost. Psalm 137 captured their anguish. By the rivers of Babylon we sat and wept when we remembered Zion. What if the temple had survived? What if Solomon's masterpiece still stood today, intact, after 3,000 years? Historians believe it would have transformed Jerusalem into the greatest pilgrimage site in human history, dwarfing Rome, Mecca, and Athens combined. In sheer material value, Solomon's temple was worth more than all other ancient wonders combined, by a factor of 10. Today, some of those original stones still exist, buried beneath Jerusalem, waiting beneath 3,000 years of history. The Western Wall, the last remnant of the Temple Mount platform, remains the most sacred site in Judaism, where prayers have been offered for 2,000 years. No building before or since has concentrated so much human wealth, skill, and devotion into a single sacred space. This was not just a building, it was the axis mundi of the ancient world, the point where heaven and earth were believed to meet. Solomon spent 7 years building God's house, and 13 years building his own palace next to it, a detail the Bible records without commentary. The Bible provides exact accounting records for the temple minus 3,300 supervisors, 30,000 monthly laborers, and materials cataloged in extraordinary detail. With no machinery, no electricity, no steel, only human hands, bronze tools, and organizational genius, they built something that would never be equaled. Solomon created history's first international supply chain, sourcing materials from Lebanon, Egypt, Arabia, and Ophir in a single coordinated project. Solomon's ship sailed to the mysterious land of Ophir, returning with 420 talents of gold, sandalwood, and precious stones for the temple's decoration. Every decorative detail was intentional. 200 bronze pomegranates adorned the pillars, symbolizing abundance, fertility, and righteousness. At its peak, the temple employed over 38,000 priests and Levites, a religious institution larger than most ancient cities. For one brief golden age, humanity built something so magnificent, so impossibly expensive and beautiful, that it changed the meaning of the word sacred forever. The temple was destroyed, rebuilt, and destroyed again, but its memory has never faded, carrying the dreams of billions across 3,000 years of history. Solomon's temple is gone, but the mountain it stood on remains holy to half the world's population, a testament to what one king built in the name of the divine.